She climbed 2 days through the frozen mountains just to reach a man who wanted to be left alone. But the bruises on her wrist told a story she was too afraid to speak. Days later, 4 armed riders appeared outside his cabin, and one sentence changed everything. "She belongs to me." What happened next shocked everyone. Watch the full story to the end and subscribe to our page so you don't miss unforgettable Wild West stories like this. Before we start the story, tell me in the comments, where are you listening from and what time is right now? The wind never carried visitors this high into the Teton Mountains. Samuel Adams had lived alone for 3 long years, and in all that time, no one had climbed the rocky trail to his cabin unless they were completely lost. His home stood on a lonely mountainside, surrounded by tall pine trees and cold gray cliffs. It was the kind of place where silence became a part of a man's soul. That afternoon, Samuel was splitting firewood when he noticed movement near the trail. A young woman was walking toward his cabin. She looked exhausted. Her dark blue travel dress was covered in dust. The hem was torn from days of walking over rough ground. Her brown hair had slipped loose from her pins, and the cold mountain wind pushed several strands across her face. She stopped a few feet from the porch. Her eyes searched the forest behind her before they finally met Samuel's. She wasn't looking at him with curiosity. She was making sure no one had followed her. Samuel rested his axe against a chopping block and waited. He had learned long ago that silence often revealed more truth than questions. The woman slowly reached into her coat and pulled out a folded letter. Without speaking, she held it toward him. Samuel noticed something before he took it. The sleeve of her dress had slipped back slightly. Dark bruises covered her wrist. Not an accident. Someone had grabbed her hard. His jaw tightened. He accepted the letter and unfolded it. His eyes immediately froze on the signature. Jessica Robert. The name brought back memories he had spent years trying to bury. Samuel read the letter twice before looking back at the woman. She looked tired, frightened, but somehow still standing with quiet strength. Without saying a single word, Samuel stepped aside and opened the cabin door. The woman finally whispered, "My name is Laurel." The cabin was small but warm. A fire burned quietly inside the stone fireplace. Everything had its place. A rifle hung above the door. Bundles of dried herbs rested near the window. Stacks of firewood lined one wall. There were no decorations, no family pictures, no signs that anyone had ever laughed inside this house. Only survival. Samuel prepared a simple meal of rabbit stew and fresh bread. Neither of them spoke much while eating. For Laurel, the silence felt strange. Back in Missouri, silence usually meant someone was angry. Here, it felt peaceful. That night, Samuel spread an extra blanket beside the fireplace. "You can sleep here." Laurel thanked him softly. It was the first time in many months that she closed her eyes without wondering if someone would force open the door before morning. Still, she woke several times during the night. Every small sound made her heart race. Samuel noticed. He didn't ask why. Far away in Jefferson City, Missouri, life had never been kind to Laurel Nathan. Her father, Thomas Nathan, had been an honest farmer. When terrible winters destroyed his crops, he borrowed money from one of the richest businessmen in the state, William Logan. At first, Logan smiled. He shook Thomas's hand. He promised everything would be fine. But debts have a way of growing faster than crops. By the spring of 1882, Thomas Nathan died, leaving behind only a small farm and a debt of $430. 3 days after the funeral, William Logan arrived. He sat across from Laurel in her own kitchen. His voice remained calm. "The debt belongs to you now." Laurel lowered her eyes. "I don't have that kind of money." "I know." A slow smile appeared on Logan's face. "There is another way." He called it an arrangement, but Laurel knew exactly what he meant. The 61-year-old businessman wanted her as his third wife, not because he loved her, because he believed he owned her. From that day forward, every Thursday, Logan sent one of his men, Reed. Reed never knocked gently. He inspected the house. He reminded Laurel about the debt. Whenever she argued, he grabbed her arm hard enough to leave bruises. Week after week, month after month, Laurel felt like a bird trapped inside a cage. One evening, while Reed tied his horse outside the farmhouse, Laurel finally made her decision. Finally, she packed only one small leather bag. Anything heavier would slow her down. Before leaving, she pulled $12 from beneath a loose floorboard. Her father had hidden the money years ago. Maybe he had always hoped it would save her one day. She slipped out the back door and disappeared before Reed ever realized she was gone. She never looked back. The journey west was harder than she imagined. The stagecoach carried her only as far as Cheyenne. Her money quickly disappeared. From there, she hired a mule driver who took her near the mountains. After that, she walked alone. For 2 full days, cold nights, steep trails, empty stomach. Every step hurt. But she kept moving, because stopping meant going back. Before leaving Missouri, Laurel had mailed a letter through a women's correspondence agency in St. Louis. Days later, she received a reply. Not from Samuel Adams, but from Jessica Robert. Jessica had written with kindness Laurel had almost forgotten existed. She invited Laurel to Wyoming. She promised Samuel was a good man. That promise became the only thing keeping Laurel alive during the long journey. Samuel watched Laurel carefully during her first week. She never sat with her back facing the door. Every loud sound made her jump. She always looked over her shoulder before stepping outside. And whenever he accidentally glanced at the fading bruise on her wrist, she quietly pulled down her sleeve. Samuel never asked questions. He simply gave her space. Little by little, they found a routine. Every morning, Samuel gathered firewood. Laurel cooked breakfast. He hunted rabbits and deer. She cleaned the cabin. Sometimes they spent hours together without speaking. Strangely, neither of them minded. For the first time in years, both of them felt less alone. One evening, as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, Laurel stood near the window washing dishes. Suddenly, she froze. Her breathing stopped. Her eyes remained fixed on the darkness outside. Samuel slowly looked up from cleaning his rifle. "What is it?" Laurel swallowed hard. "I thought I saw a light moving down the mountain." Samuel stepped outside and searched the forest. Nothing. Only pine trees, cold wind, silence. When he returned, Laurel was sitting beside the fire. Her hands were shaking. Samuel pulled a chair closer. He spoke softly. "You don't have to carry everything alone." For several long seconds, Laurel stared into the fire. Then she finally began telling him the truth about William Logan. The fire crackled softly as Laurel stared into the flames. For the first time since leaving Missouri, she allowed herself to tell someone everything. She spoke about her father, about the failing farm, about the terrible winter that had forced him to borrow money from William Logan. She described the day Logan sat across from her after the funeral, smiling as if he were offering kindness when he was really stealing her freedom. Then she spoke about Reed. Every Thursday he came to remind her of the debt. Every Thursday he grabbed her arm a little harder. Every Thursday she felt more trapped. Tears filled her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I wasn't living anymore," she whispered. "I was only waiting for the day he would force me to marry him." Samuel listened without interrupting. When she finished, silence filled the cabin again. He stood, placed another log into the fire, then looked directly into her eyes. His voice was calm. "He will never touch you again." There was no anger in his words, only certainty. For the first time in years, Laurel believed someone. That night she slept peacefully. Samuel stayed awake much longer, staring into the fire. Her pain reminded him of another person he had failed to protect. Michael. Years earlier, Samuel had not been a lonely mountain man. He had grown up in Laramie beside his best friend, Michael Robert. The two boys had learned to ride horses together. They hunted together, worked together, dreamed about building ranches side by side. Michael later fell deeply in love with a kind young woman named Jessica. Samuel had never seen his friend happier. The wedding was planned for October. The night before the ceremony, Samuel rode to Michael's house carrying a bottle of whiskey. "One last ride before married life begins," he joked. Michael laughed and agreed. It was supposed to be one happy evening between old friends. Instead, it became the worst night of Samuel's life. While riding through a narrow canyon, 3 armed robbers suddenly attacked. The fight lasted only moments. Gunshots echoed between the rocks. When everything became quiet, Michael lay bleeding on the ground. Samuel carried him home across his horse. Michael died before sunrise. The wedding never happened. Jessica buried the man she loved. Samuel buried himself in guilt. He blamed himself every single day. If he had never asked Michael to ride with him, his friend would still be alive. Unable to forgive himself, Samuel sold his ranch and disappeared into the Teton Mountains, believing loneliness was the punishment he deserved. Jessica never blamed Samuel. She raised her 2 children alone and rebuilt her life with quiet strength. Still, Samuel often visited her. Every visit ended the same way. "I'm sorry." Jessica always answered gently. "It wasn't your fault." But Samuel never believed her. Finally, Jessica decided that words would never heal him. One day she found a notice from a women's correspondence agency. An idea entered her heart. Without telling Samuel, she wrote a letter describing him. She wrote about his honesty, his courage, his quiet kindness. Months later, several replies arrived. One letter stood out immediately. It was from Laurel Nathan. Jessica somehow knew these 2 broken souls needed each other. She answered Laurel herself and invited her west. Sometimes, hope arrives without asking permission. 6 weeks after Laurel escaped Missouri, William Logan finally discovered where she had gone. Reed had followed her trail across towns, stagecoach stations, and mountain roads. When he returned with the news, Logan packed his bags immediately. He refused to lose something he believed belonged to him. The next morning, 4 riders climbed the narrow trail toward Samuel's cabin. Samuel spotted them first while checking his trap line. He hurried home. "Laurel." She looked at his face and immediately understood. "They found me?" Samuel nodded. 4 men. He reached for the rifle hanging above the door. "Stay inside." Laurel wanted to argue. Instead, she quietly stepped back. Samuel walked outside alone. Snow had just begun falling. Logan stopped his horse 20 feet from the porch. His expensive coat looked strangely out of place among the mountains. "I've come for the girl," Logan said confidently. Samuel stood still. "No." Logan pulled out legal papers. "Her father's debt belongs to me. So does she." Samuel didn't even glance at the papers. No person belongs to another. Logan's smile disappeared. Reed slowly reached toward his revolver. Samuel noticed the movement instantly. A loud gunshot shattered the silence. Samuel's bullet struck the frozen ground beside Reed's horse. The frightened horse reared into the air. Before anyone could react, Samuel rushed forward. He grabbed Logan by his coat and pulled him violently from the saddle. Logan crashed into the snow. Seconds later, Samuel's rifle rested against Logan's temple. The hired men froze. None of them had expected the quiet mountain man to move so fast. At that moment, the cabin door opened. Laurel stepped outside. She looked directly at William Logan. Months earlier, she would have lowered her eyes. Not today. "It's over," she said firmly. "I'm not going back." Logan stared at her. For the first time, he realized fear no longer controlled her. He looked at Samuel, then at his own men. None of them moved. Reed slowly holstered his gun. The other 2 men did the same. Logan knew he had lost. Without another word, he climbed back onto his horse. One by one, the 4 riders disappeared down the snowy trail. The mountain became quiet again. Snow slowly covered the hoof prints until it looked as though they had never been there. Samuel lowered his rifle. He turned toward Laurel. Neither of them spoke. Words were no longer necessary. After a long moment, Laurel, "You didn't have to risk your life for me." Samuel, "Yes, I did." She stepped closer. For the first time, neither fear nor guilt stood between them. Samuel reached out his hand. Laurel placed hers into it without hesitation. The cold mountain wind still blew through the pine trees, but neither of them felt alone anymore. Samuel finally understood that protecting Laurel had done something unexpected. It had healed the wound inside his own heart. He could never bring Michael back, but he could honor his friend's memory by choosing courage instead of endless guilt. Far away in Laramie, Jessica Roberts sat beside the window with a warm cup of coffee. A quiet smile appeared on her face. She had trusted that 2 broken lives could help each other heal. She had been right. High above the Wyoming valleys, where snow covered the lonely cabin and the mountains stood silent beneath the winter sky, Samuel and Laurel looked toward the future together. Neither of them had searched for love. Neither had expected a second chance. Yet both had found exactly what they needed. Sometimes the longest journey does not lead to a new place. It leads to a new life. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way till the end. If you enjoyed it, Please hit the like button and share it with your friends. It really helps us a lot. If you want to watch more exciting stories like this, don't forget to subscribe our page right now. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? And what time is right now? And if this story touched your heart, please send some stars. Every single star gives us huge motivation to keep creating more amazing videos for you. See you in the next story. Take care of you, friends.